Are we up? Okay. Good evening and welcome to the Arundel Camera Club meeting for the Thursday, September 21st. My name is John Milliker and I'm the club president for the 2023-2024 season. The Arundel Camera Club was founded in 1957 and exists to promote the arts, science, and education in all aspects and fields of photography. For more information about us, please visit arundelcameraclub.org. If you would love to come out and join us in person, we are located in Anne Arundel County, Maryland. We encourage you to come out. We're at the wonderful Severna Park Baptist Church, located at 506 Benfield Road, Severna Park, Maryland. Before we move to our program tonight, do we have any new members?
We're not members yet.
Not members? Well, new visitors. Harry, you're a member. You've already presented for us. Would you like to come up and talk a little bit about yourselves? No? That's okay. I get that a lot. What are your names?
Susan and Robert.
Susan and Robert. Welcome, Susan and Robert. Where'd you guys find out about us?
Oh, you used to know someone who belonged here a long time ago. Yeah. So we've known about the club for a while. Actually, Robert did come to one, probably 10 years ago.
Okay.
To a meeting.
Okay. About 10 years ago. Hopefully we'll win you guys back. Okay. Do we have any announcements from...
We heard about this talk. I'm on the Facebook page with you guys.
Perfect.
And, the reason we came tonight was because of Hope's talk.
Excellent.
No pressure.
No pressure. Wow. Do we have any announcements from any of our officers? Yes, Bob.
I'm standing in for...
Let me give you, how about I give you this? That will have to repeat you.
I'm standing in for Ron Pfeiffer. He has two announcements. The MPA contest email had initially the wrong code, but he sent out another email to correct it. The other one is next week we have prints, open theme, our first print contest of the year. And also if you come a wee bit early, because it helps us get the prints ready into the correct piles for presentation.
Okay. And anybody who joins us via the live stream, it's those people that bring those prints a little bit late that we have to delay for, so send a nasty email to them if you would like. Any other officer announcements? No? Well, let me go ahead and introduce you to Christine. She is our programs chair, and she's going to talk about our upcoming schedule and then introduce our speaker, wonderful speaker for tonight.
Actually, I'm going to pull Mike over here for a moment. For all our new members, we have a contest next week, and Mike's going to show you what he does and how he presents his photos for the contest, just as a very quick reminder so that people know how to present your prints next week.
I've got to do this and hold the mic. All right. All right, so basically, we need matted prints. You can bring 3 color prints and 3 monochrome prints. The theme this month is open. Novices will compete against novices, unlimited against unlimited. We like our prints to be matted. This is an 11 by 14. They can be no longer than like 20 inches to fit in our box. But you can do like a 8 by 10 print or something like that. And what I do is I just like create a book hinge in here with tape. And then I use little, like a T shaped tape to attach the print to the mat board. That way I can remove the print later and reuse the print. So I don't put tape on the front of the print. And then I use little glue dots to, in these corners to just seal the book up. So that it stays like that, and then we need a label on the back that has the name, the print, your name, the date and class, novice, unlimited, and the theme, and whether it's a color or monochrome print. Sometimes it's actually hard to tell, strangely enough. And then just so.
One more thing for the label. Put an arrow so that they know which direction your print goes.
Yep, so there's my little arrow so that poor Bob in the dark knows that the print goes this way, not this way. And then...
And the print needs a title.
Yes, I said title. And then, you can get these little glue dots like at the local office supply store. And I use this linen tape from art stores to to attach the prints. You can buy the mats online, like I get mine on Amazon, but you could buy them at other places. If you have to, you can go get them from Michael's and stuff. And that's it.
The backing boards really help. They don't technically have to be there, but it does help them pass it through without damaging your print or the prints behind yours. And that has happened in the past.
One quick thing, in that corner is a whole bunch of old camera bags and gear. I will take any and almost all offers if anyone's interested. Have a look.
So let's move on to our schedule for the next month. Next week on September 28th is our color and monochrome print. Theme of open. If you don't know what that means, it means it can be anything you want it to be. It can be portraits, flower, anything. October 5th is our portrait night. I am still looking for volunteers. If anyone knows any artists and or musicians, or anyone that practices any type of art. Our theme for December is artisans and craftsmen. So I'm trying to help people get photographs for that with our portrait night. And if there's anyone that wants to bring in some lighting setups, I want to have 4 or 5 throughout here. We'll bring 2, but and not everyone needs to bring. So if you want to bring, please message me and see if I need more people to bring. I would appreciate any help with either of those 2 things.
Bring your cameras.
You don't have to actually be a musician, just own an instrument and bring it.
Yeah, you just have to pose with it. So it doesn't have to be, you just have to look like you kind of know what you're doing with it for the portrait. On October 12th is our digital contest for next month, which has the theme of flowers. Therefore, our talk tonight and why we're having a botanist come talk to us. On October 19th, we have Ryan Maurer coming in to talk about cave photography, one of our other newer members. On Saturday, October 21st is our October field trip to the Fire Museum of Maryland for Lantern Night. And then on October 26th is our color and monochrome print contest for October with, again, the theme of flowers. Any questions about our schedule?
Can Ed talk a little bit about the Fire Museum?
Do you want to say anything about the Fire Museum, Ed?
It's a wonderful event, the Fire Museum. It's up in Timonium, and they have a lot of fire engines, and the firemen will be there, so it's very interesting. Very interesting
Why is it a
evening.
night trip this time? What's
And they're going to
special?
have the lights. We're going to have the lights on the
Outside, you mean?
Yeah, they're going to have lights.
It's inside. It will be lit primarily by lanterns on the fire equipment.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, fire truck lanterns.
Okay, for tonight, we have Hope Brooks speaking for us. She's one of our members that joined us last year, and she is going to give us a presentation on botanical photography. Come on over, Hope, and thank you. You have a mic, so.
Oh wait, I should not stand in front of it. Am I visible to the camera? Awesome. All right, folks, my name's Hope Brooks, like Christine mentioned, and I work at the Smithsonian Environmental Research Center in Edgewater, Maryland, and I primarily do botanical things. I did have a very bad foray into studying bivalves for 6 months, and I regretted every moment of it, but that's not what I'm here to talk to you about today. Next slide. So I study plants in a diverse array of habitats, and then next clicky click. And conditions may vary. So this is a beautiful prairie that we were sampling orchids in Illinois, and you can tell that we've got black-eyed Susans. I'm walking in stuff about up to here, and it was wonderful and magical. And then next. And I get to go to amazing sites to study a variety of plants. Primarily, I work with native orchids. One of the big initiatives at the Smithsonian Environmental Research Center is studying how our native orchids grow, how they thrive, the fungi that they need to grow throughout their life cycle, and to bring that knowledge, because orchids are a wonderful gateway drug, to the people. And so if you want to learn more about that, there's a whole group of us called the North American Orchid Conservation Center. But we go out and we sample in places like this. This is not my photo. There is a story associated with the fact that this isn't my photo. And this is going to kind of tie into some of the challenges of botanical photography, especially in situ when you're out in the environment. So this is a beautiful quaking bog up on the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. If you're a hydrologist, you'll end up in a debate. Is it a bog or a fen? But that's not what I want to talk about. And way out where the folks in yellow are is this really fancy orchid. Next. It is the dragon's mouth orchid, Arethusa bulbosa, and I was out for a conference in the middle of July, and we were told this very uncommon in our area orchid is up and it's blooming. And so we had dinner, and it was thundering and lightning everywhere. And so all around us at this point in time, lightning is crashing down into the wetland. And we had about 20 minutes to go and see if we could go get pictures of some of these magical orchids. And we had heard reports, okay, people have everybody who's gone here has fallen into the bog. And I thought to myself, well, I'm gonna be different, and I'm not going to fall into the bog. And so I trundled my way across this little board that went across a creek and everything, and I had kept my boots dry. It was raining. The thousands of mosquitoes the size of birds hadn't taken me away yet. And I made it to about there with my camera in hand as I was scampering between like lightning bolts, and found a very deep hole up to here. And my camera and I went deep into the water, and even though I landed with my hands above my head, smart, it was completely tanked at that point in time. So I shoot with a Canon 7D, and it is weather sealed, and the weather seal was a really good thing because it did eventually turn on, but for the remainder of that trip, my camera was not working, completely bricked, and ended up in my bag in the back of the car. I was distraught. I ended up getting to shoot my boss's Nikon. I don't remember which Nikon it was, but it was an experience in being ambicamerous. Next slide. And so all of these places that we work vary. You can tell that a lot of my work is in wetlands. Wetlands are by default wet. And I also work in salt marshes. I think that's the next slide. Next slide. Oh no, so all sorts of wetlands. I forgot that I put this in here. This is a ciénaga, which is a freshwater wetland that is found in the desert Southwest. So this is a spring in Arizona. We could see the border. Mexican border is right there. Border Patrol is driving through at all times to check to make sure that people aren't smuggling drugs. And I'm carrying my camera through this wetland where, once again, the other photographer, videographer for the Desert Botanical Garden went in up to here. So there's a theme in what I'm getting at. It's a really rugged environment. Next. And the places we work are also I also work in salt marshes. So beyond wet, it's also salty. And if you all probably know, salt plus camera equals bad. The equation is very simple. If you go in salt water, cameras don't like it. Cameras don't want to be salty and wet. That's Sylvia, one of the graduate students who worked with our lab, and she's sampling. And you can also tell that by and large, my work is really dirty. Sylvia is profoundly clean. She's actually like pristine at this point in time. Soil sampling and setting up plots is a very dirty task, and often you'll also see we're carrying a lot of things. She's relatively unencumbered in this photo, but by and large, when I'm out and doing my work, and also taking photos, I'm carrying a lot of things that aren't related to photography at all. So everything that I carry with me has to either fit with me in a small package, or I have to decide that it is worth it to hump a ton of crap with me, not crap, valuable photographic equipment. Next slide. And it can be really bad, actually. So not only is it beautiful, but it can be ugly. That's the Patapsco. That's why Mr. Trash Wheel exists. Next slide. And so why plants? I mean, by and large, people love plants. First of all, they're the basis of the food chain. All energy that we get in life comes from plants because they can capture the sun. They're a source of food. They are a source of research. That's Arabidopsis thaliana, which is like the basis of plant genetics that people studied. They are beautiful. People love to grow plants. Look at this. You can grow a rack full of orchids. I did a talk about some of my orchid research at an orchid society, and I realized that I can understand the ones outside, but I can't do that because either my cat will eat them or I leave them behind. Plants are also weeds. People think about plants frequently. I have to make my lawn perfect, get rid of the dandelion. And also they're food and just a source of awe-inspiring beauty, whether it's big or they're small. Next slide. And so as a scientist, I am very keenly aware of my scope of knowledge. I'm sitting in front of a room of people who have profoundly more experience than I do in photography. And so I am not going to sit here and talk about things as an expert, but I will talk about the things I know. And so I want to start out with my scope of knowledge. So in the start, around 2016, I realized that I could finally take photos. Smartphones were able to fit in my pocket. They were still small, and I'm a woman that is very small, so I wear child-sized pants. So things I can fit in my pocket plus smartphone is a really tight Venn diagram. And so I knew what I wanted, but usually the reduction that occurs when you put something onto a screen this big or project it through the ether to the folks who are watching on the computers, there's some technical things that a pixel peeper would find when looking at that. You know, I don't have the depth of field I want in some of them. I can't get the detail I want. And I couldn't find the pieces of information in those plants that are crucially important to what I study because they're really important parts of plants that as a scientist, I want to be able to see. Next slide. And so over time, with more education maybe, and with better light, better stabs in the not quite dark, and Canon DSLRs, I think I've gotten some things a little better, but I still have a lot to learn. So I always want to couch that I am on a learning journey, and I think and I hope we all are together. Next slide. And so I figured I would kind of give a rough outline as to where I'm coming from and where we're going and where we're definitely not going. So one thing I'm relatively good at is plant ID. I study these. They're my friends. I have a deep, intimate relationship with many plants, whether it's positive, negative, or ambivalent. And as a scientist, I also know a lot about the anatomy of these plants. I went to school to sit and tell you about the subcellular structures of plants. And if you want to know about that, we can talk about that. But by and large, my photography doesn't deal with subcellular structures. I like microscopy. It's a lot of fun. But it was only a couple of years ago our lab got a really decent microscope, and I haven't had projects that have had me sitting in front of it for 6 hours a day and snapping away for a while. I'm also really keenly aware of the ecological context of plants. So plants all have a place. They don't just sit there in a vacuum against a black background or a white background like you'll see today. They exist in nature, in situ. And as a scientist, that context is really, really important in photography because that's just a different branch of how we can approach our photos. And also, one thing I'm really aware of is, as a conservationist, the idea of, I'm gonna call gentle photography. Because when you go out into nature, you can actually do an extreme amount of harm just to get the shot. And I wanna tell you about how you can get the shot in a way that is both good for you as a photographer, but also good for the environment and good for the plants that you're taking a picture of. I'm also mostly shooting with natural lighting. Like you saw, I'm out in the field under a variety of conditions. When my field work is, that's when I'm out in the field. So if it's bright and sunny and harsh lighting, I'm working with bright and harsh lighting. My plants and my access to those plants are often directly tied to my work. And also a little bit about the gear that I use. Next. And so tangentially within kind of the edge and the fringe of what I'll touch on is also the theory. I'm futzing around poorly with focus stacking. Zareen decided that it didn't, my free trial has now ended apparently, and I have to give the Zareen monster the money. Yay. Flash photography, I finally have a working ring flash that isn't dying in my pack on the regular. I'm really hard on gear. You'll see later also that Ryan is very hard on gear, so when you hear his talk about cave photography, the environments we play in are very, very rough. There's like street photo used and nature used plus flash sometimes doesn't go well. Flash units are basically like trash units. And that also goes again to gear. And then one more clickening. And then, but what I'm not really gonna touch upon, but what you'll see my horrible or moderate attempts at is floral arrangements. I do like artistic photos and I try to find the artistry in what I see in nature, but if nature provides me with something, I take what I can get. And you'll notice that some of the photos of the plants I have, the plants aren't actually in the best condition. You'll notice that some of the edges of the plants are brown and mungy. It's what the reality is in nature, and I try to find good ones, but if that doesn't exist and it's a plant that's interesting and it's telling something like who pollinates this plant, I'm still gonna take that photo. I don't really studio work on this, and there's a lot of gear that I don't use and don't know about, so that scope is kinda over here right now. Next slide. And so first on plant identification. If you find a plant out in the field and you're interested in this, I want to give a plug to this amazing app called Seek. Seek is a collaboration between iNaturalist and software developers that made this program. And essentially what you can do is you can whip your phone out and you can take it and your phone will say, I know where you are because your location data is on. You have to have it on, it makes it happier. So it can winnow down the choices of what you got. You can point it at the thing that you're looking at, and 80% of the time, if you're not going for something really obscure like a grass, it will tell you what species you've got or get you pretty close. And that works for plants, that works for animals, that works for insects, for fungi. It's really cool. And it's all based upon knowledge that comes from iNaturalist, and I'll tell you about that in a second. Next slide. Now, the other way I really learn about plant identification is plant identification books. I have bookshelves filled with books, and they're all just pictures and drawings of plants. And so if you spend enough time looking at that, first of all, you learn what plants look like what, but also you kind of get a bit of an idea of what makes a good photo for identification, because there are some really great books with really great photos that tell me really good information, and there are some that I can't really tell what I'm looking at. Next slide. And that's something that's really important because there are a massive collection of experts about anything and everything that put their information on iNaturalist. And iNaturalist is a website where you can take a picture of something. You might be a research grade scientist that has publications and knows all about, say, salamanders, and you can say, this is obscure salamander A, and people will say, that's really cool, you saw it. It tells scientists about where you might find something, if it's a flower, when it's blooming, when it's fruiting. It can also give people a wide collection of information about, say, what pollinates a plant. But what's also interesting is if you don't know what you've got, you can actually go and plop a picture on there and say, I don't know what this is. And as long as the picture's decent enough, somebody is gonna probably get onto iNaturalist because they love it. It's like Pokemon. And they're gonna go and identify it for you in less than 24 hours, and it's astounding. And what really aids that is good photography. And so that's kind of the thing I wanna talk about, research grade photography. Next shot. And so to do that, it's really good to know about the parts of plants because plants have parts and parts help us identify them. And some of those parts are really diagnostic. So this is the grass of Parnassus. This was up in Michigan in one of the bogs. And you can see some of the structures that I've got noted here. We've got reproductive structures that go from the top, the stigma, where all the pollen goes, the style, where the pollen goes, the ovule, the egg, which gets pollinated, which gets fertilized by that pollen. And you can see that there are also anthers, those little yellow dibbles here, and the filaments that connect the anther down to the receptacle, which is where our ovary is. And this kind of stuff doesn't really matter, but what does matter is that there are minute structures that are really important in identification that a lot of times scientific photographs need to focus on. Next slide. And leaves are the same way. You can see that there's all sorts of interesting tiny parts that you see with your eyes and you integrate as you see a leaf, but you maybe don't fully think about. The way the veins go, are they branching like this or are they parallel? You can tell a lot based upon the orientation. How close is the base of the leaf to the stipule? That can tell you a lot. Is that petiole, which is like the leaf's little stem, hairy or not? That can tell you a lot. And so you got to be able to focus and be able to see that. If your leaf is blurry, but your flower isn't, and it's really hard to tell the difference between some flowers, you might lose really important information. Next slide. And so everything has an ecological context. Now, plants have habitats and they matter. You can literally see that here is a habitat. This is thousands of white-fringed orchids sitting in front of this billboard on the side of the road in Charlotte, North Carolina. There's Venus flytraps in there, and there's a variety of really nifty little critters that are living there. Next slide. But if I just took this picture that I have of Platanthera, which shows the detail of those individual white dots, you wouldn't understand the context of what that plant lives in. And sometimes that context is just as important as the artistic zooming in. Oftentimes, as a botanist, I need both. I want to know where it lives, and I also want to know what it looks like. Next slide. And so now this is my time to talk about gentle photography. And one of the big things behind gentle photography is this idea of leave no trace, which is a basic outdoors appreciation tenet that I think people probably have all heard about, but it's always worth noting. So when you're going out to take photos, the first thing you want to think about, and these are such small, tiny things, especially for the back, plan ahead. So you want to know about the regulations and permits and things associated with some areas. There are some places, some preserves, where you won't be allowed to take commercial photographs. So go read the billboard that's sitting there in front, because there are cave preserves that we go caving on. No commercial photography allowed. My photos are mine. I can post them on the internet. People can enjoy them, but I can't sell them. I can't make money off of this conservancy. And you also want to be prepared for extreme weather, hazards, and emergencies, because if you're rushing out of somewhere, you might trample through a very sensitive environment to save your skin, but who matters more? And that's a really big emotional question that's hard to answer. But if you like plants, you might say, maybe we don't step on that and we try to stay out a little bit longer. Use your map, use your compass, know where you are. This one, if you're in the backcountry trying to get pictures, camp on durable surfaces. There are places in our ecosystems that we live in that are very fragile. The desert has biotic crusts that if you step on them, you'll destroy this whole little tiny microscopic flora and fauna that's growing there. Travel on those same durable surfaces. High altitude alpine plants get a lot of kicking and pushing on them throughout the winter, but they're also fragile in the summer. If you step on them, they don't really like that. Don't litter. That's really simple. If you have to go to the bathroom, plants are around where you go to the bathroom. Dispose of your human waste appropriately. That could mean packing it out in a bag. That could mean digging a cat hole, or making sure you go and you actually use a latrine if it's possible there, even if it's icky. Don't take things. That's another one. Sometimes it's a really pretty flower, but if you don't know what that flower is, you could have plucked the last one of its kind, and it's a perfect photo, but it's the end of a species. Don't set things on fire that you shouldn't set on fire. Animals exist, don't harass them. Keep your food safe and be nice. Next slide. Next. So when you're out, there's also considerations when you're taking plant pictures. Be aware of what's around you. Sometimes you'll step backwards and you might step onto another plant that you wanted to photograph. Next. And when you're moving through areas, a lot of these wetlands are actually quite sensitive. If you take a large group of people through them, you'll notice that foot trails have developed. So try to approach plants, especially when you're in a group, one person at a time, and try to spread out to disperse your impact. Now that's kind of a debatable thought process. Do we all want to go and stay on one tiny little trail like little lemmings, or do we want to all fan out? And so that's something that sometimes when you're with a group, you'll want to think about together. There's 3 of us. Let's just stay on one path. There's 30 of us. Let's spread out so that our footsteps don't make a deep rut. Next one. And also be alert for non-flowering or immature plants. Now that gets to the point at looking at the structure of these plants. These plants have leaves. These have other parts of their bodies, essentially. Know the plant in its life cycle too, because you might step on one plant that will flower next year, but if you step on it, you've made it so that it can't grow for the remainder of the year. It can't get the nutrients it needs. It can't store the nutrients it needs. It might not be able to flower and set seed. So it's really important to be alert. Up next. Tread lightly. Compaction kills. There are plants that can take a bit more compaction. But if you look at trees where people walk around them routinely, you'll notice, according to foresters and everything, that those trees are having a harder time than trees in the forest where they don't have people stomping on them or where they don't have landscapers covering their roots with rocks. Next. When you are taking photos out in nature, and if this is, I want to make sure that people on the internet can see because this is me doing a goofy little dance. When you're taking photos of flowers, often flowers are down here. And so you really want to minimize your contact with the ground. So laying on your stomach to get the shot is usually not very conservation-minded. Or sitting on the ground like this and like with your camera, also not usually very good for the things that you're taking photos of and the little micro habitat around it. Next. By and large, we try not to touch the plants. Next. I mean, some of them you can. Like if you think it's a dandelion, and you're like hardcore, that's a dandelion, do as you wish. But there are some that aren't dandelions. In general, when we're taking photos, especially of these rare orchids, we do remove leaves and twigs and little blades of grass to keep our focus in the right plane for the shot, but we try to avoid excessive gardening. Because think about it, sometimes those plants that surround the flower are actually a protection. If a deer has to shove its face through all sorts of different barberry branches, it probably won't eat the flower. But if you prune it all away because it's so nice and purple against this, like that, that's a wonderful invitation for a snack. Next up. Right angle viewfinders are wonderful. It means you don't have to bend over and all that good jazz. Next up. And before you go, kind of prepare yourself. So stumbling around, opening the pack, dumping the things, they're still a microhabitat. And I think same thought, use care when placing your tripod. And the last point, remove location information from publication in your EXIF file. There are a lot of really cool plants that aren't rare, but are on the edge of rarity. And one of the biggest dangers to those plants and to basically anything, like our favorite areas in the wild, is location information. Your nearest waterfall, 10 waterfalls for great photos. That's when you find 100 drunk people there and broken bottles and poached plants. So one thing I'm really, really very careful about is often trying to remove locational context information for the broader public, especially when I'm trying to protect something. And that does mean removing that geotagging from my EXIF files. Because I know that I have gone onto people's Flickr and said, I want to see that. They've told me which forest, it's the Chattahoochee. All right, let's see. Click, 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 download and see. Was he sloppy this time? Did he leave it? Because I'll get that point. And you don't want that to happen, especially if it's something really special. Next slide. And so you can really see, this was a video on the left. I don't know if you can click it if the embedding is happy, but this is me walking through the green swamp in North Carolina, and this is a dedicated trail, but you can also see all of those orange little smudges are orchids. This is my phone, literally a phone video. And all of those are orchids. And so there are multiple little desire paths that people have made to them. It's a well-known area for its botanical diversity, and people go along the trail and they go, ooh, I wonder what that is. Ooh, I wonder what that is. And you get this dendritic path. And those desire paths are really, really, really noticeable, even in a durable environment like a lawn to a building. Next up. So stay on the path. Protect the plants. Next up. And so then it's show and tell time a little bit, and then us doing stuff, but I have like 4 more slides. Next. So this is your preparation to throw rotten tomatoes at me, because I'm going to tell you a very deep, dark secret about some of my botanical photography. Next. I often end up using my Google Pixel. As Chase Jarvis says, the best camera is the one that's with you. And oftentimes when I'm carrying a metric ton of stuff with me and trying not to lose my things, sometimes the camera du jour is the one that I can fit in my pocket. Next. And so, I mean, you know the stats. Things have gone downhill. We've gotten rid of film, and then we did all the bad things, and now we've got these things. Next. And it turns out everybody loves photo and video apps, so I'm like part of the 20-year-old, or now I'm 30-year-old crowd. So bad me, but I also do bring my DSLR out, especially when I've got enough space in my bag and I'm not going to horrific places. Next. And so one thing I wanted to point out is that there is a noticeable, but also a not that horribly noticeable difference as well. So the top is photos from, so I've got on the left, wait, let me check. Yeah, on the left is DSLR photos. In the center is left is cell phone, DSLR, and then a zoom in on the DSLR to say, yeah, you can definitely see things. There is some information that is lost even with my Google Pixel, go figure. Pixel peeping tells no lies. But by and large, even if I were to zoom in on the photo from my phone, I am still able, at this point in time, technologically, to get information that has utility, at least scientifically speaking. Next. And so one thing I also wanted to note is that when it comes to science, size matters. And this is just one of the orchids I was studying. And this photo here is going to be used for scientific research and for publication so that we can understand a lot of the floristic qualities of this individual plant. And that's where scales come in. By having a scale bar, you're able to figure out how big this creature is. Next. And that was it. And then other than that, there's like a collection of magical plants that are arranged. And I told you, I don't really arrange. So behold and enjoy.
Hey, this is why I asked everyone. This is why I asked everyone to bring your cameras. We have 3 stations set up. We'll turn on the lights. We'll turn on, and people can go and take some pictures of some of the wonderful flowers that Hope brought in for us to play with.
I stole them from my backyard and a little bit of the church.
What was your most exciting expedition?
Oh, well, there's a lot of them. I guess like in what...
Best one.
I mean, honestly, Arizona probably, this past year in Arizona. The border is a beautiful place and the skies are really big and wetlands in the desert are magical. It's astounding to be up at 4 a.m. with that beautiful like glowing sunshine and walking through grasses up to my waist and poking through it to find an orchid that's like this big and is only found in 2 wetlands in the United States. So it was a fantastic time.
We're going to say goodbye to our online friends for this next part because there's not going to be much for you to see, and we will see you guys next week.
I believe I turned it off.
But if anyone needs help, I set up that one, and grab your cameras, walk around.